So this is it. The day has finally arrived. After being cooped up in that seed pod for so long, it's finally my time to be set free, cast out into the big wide world, all on my own. It's time to start my journey. Am I nervous? Of course. Who knows? I might not even make it to the ground before being swept up and eaten by the horrifying creatures I'm told are out there. Does that put me off? Never. It's time for an adventure. It all began on a warm spring morning, no different from any other. There I lay, pressed up against all the other seeds as normal, when suddenly I felt a strong movement ripple through the pod. This wasn't like any other kind of movement I'd felt before. No, it was my ticket out of here, my time to start the next chapter of my life. This movement meant opportunity. I could become anything, a wise old tree here to stay for decades or even centuries. I could become a beautiful piece of ornate furniture or a musical instrument that makes sounds that could never previously have been conceived. This journey could lead me anywhere, and the excitement of that notion was almost too much for me to bear. All of these thoughts were rushing through my mind as fast as the wind that was carrying me to my first destination. On top of this, the sight of this amazing, beautiful and mystical land that was zooming past made me certain that this adventure, whether good or bad, was going to change my life. Before I knew it, the first part of this already exhilarating trip was over. I'd made it and was successfully planted firmly in the cool, damp soil. Once again, the waiting game had begun, but I was more than happy to sit this one out. I now had an indefinite amount of time alone with my thoughts, which were now even more filled with hope and wonder than ever before. And who knows, I might even be able to somehow make a mark of my own. You know, make some kind of difference. Ambitious, I know, but I hadn't come this far just to be killed off by some bad weather or a tree-killing murderer. Bit by bit, my roots began to develop and spread. Small at first. Every single day I grew that little bit bigger, that bit stronger, and more importantly, that bit more sure that my visions would, and were, coming true. So the seasons passed year by year, and with each one I could sense myself gaining more and more knowledge. This cycle would be the process that I would go through for the best part of a century. I saw countless other trees and plants come and go, but not all of them failed, for some really did make a difference, sacrificing themselves to serve a much greater purpose than I had so far achieved. In fact, a seed had come from a tree merely a few metres away from my mother tree, and which had grown up its whole life only a branch width away from me, was one day cut down to the stump and taken away to be chopped into pieces and disposed of. Or so we thought. A few years after this tragic event, a little bird told me, literally, that tree had gone on to much bigger and better things. Apparently it had been made into what they call planks of wood, which in turn were given to a talented furniture maker, who carefully crafted the wood into something called a desk, which was bought by a human called Lewis Carroll. Sometime later, seated at this very desk, he wrote a book about a girl who fell down a rabbit hole and ended up in this whole other crazy world, as if this one isn't crazy enough. It's all pretty vague, but apparently the humans were all really impressed by his writing, and that book has gone down in history. My greatest claim to fame, to date, and I know for certain to be true, comes from a tree I once knew that was later made into reams of paper, upon which another author, J.D. Salinger, would write his famous book, The Catcher in the Rye. But that's not all. Sadly, this book was later read by a troubled human called Mark David Chapman. He became so obsessed with it that he took on the role of the main character from the book and set out to kill one of his own idols, a musician called John Lennon, a man who was loved and worshipped by many of the other humans. Lennon had formed this fairly popular band called the Beatles and had written hundreds of songs on a guitar that was made of wood from the very same tree that was used to make the paper for the first draft of J.D. Salinger's book. That's right, the very same book that would later lead to the demise of this talented musician. But that's another story. So back to me. Year after year, as others came and left, for better or for worse, I had nothing more to do but stand there and wonder what would eventually become of me. Was this it? Or was there another journey just around the corner? Before long, there came a group of humans armed with great weapons. I'd witnessed this act enough by this point to know what was going on. It was my time. Once again, a new journey was on the horizon, a new adventure. The million thoughts that were racing through my mind were brought to a cold, hard stop with the first swing of the mysterious weapon that would be the ticket to the next part of my adventure. It all happened so fast. One moment I was standing on the spot where I planted myself all those years ago, and the next, for the first time since my rapid flight from pod to soil, I was once again given a chance to see a bit more of this planet Earth place. With the knowledge and experience I'd gained within years, this journey was slightly, only slightly, less nerve-wracking, but equally as exciting. After having my branches stripped and my trunk chopped into more movable pieces, yes, it is as terrifying as it sounds, I was carried away piece by piece and launched into a huge container which would take me to my next destination. The next hour or two was nothing more than pitch blackness, a short amount of time alone with my thoughts. Before long, the container opened and a light was flooding in. As I was transferred from container to building, I took one last look around. I remember seeing one or two other trees, groups of busy humans, and birds that had previously sat on my branches and even made homes of their own upon me, using twigs that I had already shed. The only other thought that I remember having was one of wonderment. In what form would I be leaving this building? With each step of the process, it became a little clearer what I was being crafted into. I was shaved and stripped down into 4 thin planks of wood. Floorboards? No. I had another 3 planks placed on my back, which were then firmly attached with these metal nails. I was now beginning to take real shape. Yes! I was now a door. Letting my excitement get the better of me, I began to imagine the sort of door I would become. I fantasised about the regular human contact and the plethora of stories that I would collect as a result. Wonder and joy filled every grain in my newly crafted body. What would I become? The door to a hospital that would welcome thousands of little humans to the world? No. The door to a school that would create one of the world's greatest thinkers? No. I could see a house. The bedroom door to the future Prime Minister? No. I went through the house. A back door? No. Outside the house. A toilet door? Yes. Yes. Over 100 years of waiting, and this is the path that my fate had chosen to lead me down, to become a toilet door left outside to rot for the unforeseeable future. Brilliant. Just brilliant. This was certainly not the kind of regular human contact I'd been dreaming about. I didn't even want to think of the stories I would in fact be collecting. My fate was sealed with 2 metal hinges that firmly attached my top and bottom to the cold bricks that housed this, soon to be filthy, privy. For the next century, I once again stood in the same spot, watching the seasons pass by. Several different families occupied the house I stood and looked at. They came and went. I got to know each in far more detail than I care to mention. Some of the families would occasionally cover me in something they called paint. I had many different looks: black, white, yellow, dark green, light green. I didn't much care for any. I'd given up on myself, and before I knew it, so had the humans. One day, a bird told me that the humans were progressing. There now were toilets inside, and so this, of course, made me obsolete. I didn't care. The sooner I rotted away, the better. My journey was over. How wrong I was. There was a period of time where the house stood empty, followed by a good 10 years where, each year, just as the summer was turning to autumn, a group of 5 humans, all of similar ages, would move into the house, stay until the following summer, and then leave. This pattern repeated 8 times until finally, just 9 months ago, a group of male humans moved into the house. One, particularly handsome of these humans, appeared to strike some form of interest in me. Every so often he would stand and closely inspect my broken panels. I watched him counting my many layers of peeling paint thoughtfully, stroking his chin. Listening to his human companions, I learned that his name was Nathan. It turned out that he, like the other humans who had occupied the house over the last few years, was a student at a university, a student who studied fine art. At one time, this would have sparked a flurry of excitement, culminating in a crazy dream that this artist was going to turn me into a sculpture that would gain worldwide fame and I would be preserved in a gallery forever. But not now, not in the state I was in. I've been told that art humans have a different way to the rest. They do crazy things that some of the other humans don't understand. But even an artist couldn't want me, could they? Well, luckily for me, this artist was that crazy that he did in fact see something in me that he found too interesting not to explore. He lifted me up off the bed of damp leaves that I'd been lying on since the previous year's humans had some sort of party and one had forgotten how to stand up, and fell into me, freeing me from the brick that held me up for almost a century. He put me in a machine with wheels unlike anything I'd ever seen before, and transported me to this building full of paintings and sculptures and drawings. It was warm, and I began to dry out. He spent a few days doing that chin stroke thing that he does, and then began to write words on my front side. After a while, it became clear that he was an imaginative dreamer just like me. He'd come up with this whole story about the journey that I had been on, and how I'd become a door. So some other arty humans came and looked at me, and read bits of this story that he'd made up about me. They seemed to really like it, so I wasn't necessarily turned into a beautiful sculpture. But one thing seemed pretty certain. This was one human who was not about to let me be broken into small pieces and disposed of. He turned me into art. Standing proud in a clean white gallery space for a few days, I thought I was indestructible. But remember how I said that arty humans can sometimes do crazy things? Well, about 3 months ago, Nathan was overcome by a flash of arty craziness. From nowhere he came at me, armed with tools similar to those that brought an end to my tree days. He viciously swung at me, as though in rages of fury. I was being stripped down panel by panel, tiny shards of my aging wood soaring through the air and collecting in piles of wood chippings on the floor. After just over a week, I'd been reduced to nothing more than a few buckets full of broken wood and flakes of text-covered paint. But something wasn't right here. I'd come across enough humans in my years from seed to tree to toilet door to know a bit about how they worked. I could see in his eyes he wasn't finished with me yet. He had an idea that would complete my journey and make all these years worth it. I knew he did. He had to. I lay in piles of thousands of little pieces and waited patiently. He didn't let me down. I was right. He had one more idea up his sleeve. Day in and day out for almost exactly 1 month, Nathan would come and visit. He'd trawl through the buckets he'd put me in, carefully selecting pieces of me and placing me on a table. He used this amazing thing some clever human made a while back called a camera, and this other fascinating thing, I think they call it a computer, and eventually, somehow, managed to make me look as though I was moving once again. The moving picture he made using my broken up chips told the same story that he'd written all over me a few months before. And then you'll never guess what he did next. Just to make sure I wasn't going anywhere, he used those same pieces of me that he used in the moving story, and pressed me tightly in this big machine that turned me into a new piece of wood that he used to show his story on. And just in case you're one of those humans that thinks a bit slower than the rest, I'll give you a hint. The thing you're looking at right now, the thing you've been stood here looking at for the last 9 minutes and 22 seconds, is me. The seed, the tree, the wood, the door, and now look at me. I'm a work of art.